And now, Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and Washington Post editorial writer Jonathan Capehart sits down with NAACP Chairman Julian Bond to discuss the intersection of gay rights and civil rights, marriage equality for all, and a friendship with a gay man who was the architect of the 1963 March on Washington.
You've been chairman of the NAACP since 1998, correct?
Right.
How has the organization changed or evolved since the civil rights movement?
Well, it has changed focus in a slight way, because we've always had the same focus, which is fighting racial discrimination. We've done that since 1909, and I'm sorry to say we'll probably be doing it for some time in the future.
Let's talk about the time back during the civil rights movement. You've said that there were many gays and lesbians involved in the movement, of course, and you credited them with shaping your views on gay rights. Did you know Bayard Rustin?
Yes.
Talk about Bayard Rustin. He was part of Dr. King's inner circle. He helped pull off the March on Washington in 1963, and he was gay.
He, as you say, he was just a seminal figure in this movement because King depended on Bayard for so many things. He was King's first educator in nonviolence, and he just expanded King's knowledge of this 100-fold. You know, Bayard wrote the first article ever published under Dr. King's name. I think it was, I'm not sure it was in the Nation magazine, but an article sort of revisiting the Montgomery bus boycott and saying what it meant, and Bayard Rustin wrote that. To say he organized the March on Washington really doesn't give him enough credit. He put this thing together. Now, we're used to, you know, big protests in Washington nowadays. They happen, it seems, almost every week or so. But this was almost a first, and it was certainly the first involving black people. And it was a first involving bringing people from all over the country here in Washington for this event. And Rustin just was such a superb organizer. He pulled it off and no problem.
You are one of the few prominent members of the civil rights movement to come out full square in favor of gay marriage.
It just seems to be something right to do. It seems to me that the right to be married is a civil right. And I believe civil rights ought to be extended to everybody. Who ought not have these rights? What category of people ought not have these rights? I can't think of one. I've been married twice, and I know what the benefits are, the economic benefits are to a couple. And I don't want to shut other people off from these benefits.
Earlier this year, you opened the 20th Annual Creating Change Conference, sponsored by the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force. And you said then, quote, "Like race, our sexuality is not a preference. It is immutable, unchangeable, and the Constitution protects us all against prejudices and discrimination based on immutable differences." What do you say to those who flat out disagree with that assessment?
Well, if they seem to be open to some kind of rational argument, then I try to make a rational argument. Your sexuality is an immutable characteristic. It's something you're born with. You don't say, hey, I think I'll be gay. You are gay when you're born, or you're not gay.
So what is the connection between the civil rights movement and the gay civil rights movement as we know it today?
At the bottom, it's these immutable characteristics. You are what you are, and you cannot be discriminated against in this country for what you are. That's the similarity, that's the closeness, and the fact that the black civil rights movement came to public attention before the gay civil rights movement, which is existing at the same time, but I don't think well known to people. These draw from each other, and the gay movement draws tactics and techniques and songs and slogans, as did the Hispanic movement, as did the women's movement. And it's not that these movements are taking from us, because the black movement took from other movements before us. We took from the labor movement. And I never heard of people from the labor movement complaining about this. And for black people to complain about this, we ought to be proud of this. Say, look what we did. We created a model that other people have followed, and they followed it successfully. Good for us.
The widow of Dr. Martin Luther King, that was Coretta Scott King. Did you ever talk about this?
No, I never did. I never talked to her about this, just as I never talked to my colleagues in the movement about these things. I never talked to her about it. But I quoted her as often as I could. And when she died, and it was announced that Ebenezer Baptist Church, where her husband had been pastor was too small for the funeral ceremony, and it was instead headed for a church run by a notorious homophobic minister in Atlanta. I decided not to go.
What should gay people know about her that they might not already know?
Well, first, I don't think many of them know that she was this strong advocate for gay rights, for all of the things that gay people want and need. I think her advocacy of these things is relatively unknown. And when I speak to audiences and quote her, I can see some of the people saying, really? You know, happily, but really? And so I think they could learn some more about her. She was in many ways a remarkable person, and to think of her as the wife and widow of Martin Luther King in some ways diminishes her, because she was more than that. She was greater than that. She had a life of her own. She was an independent person. So of course she was the wife. Of course she was the mother. Of course she was the standard bearer after he died. But she was more than that.
Mm-hmm. You have gone basically around the country campaigning against anti-gay marriage amendments in various states. Did you voluntarily do this? Did people come to you and say, you know, we could really use your name and your stature behind this?
Both those things happened. The NAACP is opposed to these amendments. We don't have a position on marriage equality. We're neutral on that, or agnostic on that. But we do oppose these amendments because we think it's wrong to single out any group of people for special treatment. And that's what these amendments do. And so wherever they've raised their heads, we've campaigned against them. And where I've been able to physically go, I've done it myself.
Mm-hmm. Just before she died, Mildred Loving, who was the wife of the couple of the famous Supreme Court case, Loving versus Virginia, which ended the ban on interracial marriage, just before she died, she came out in favor of marriage equality. To the gay community, what's the significance of that, do you think?
Well, it ought to have significance not just to the gay community, but the African-American community and the American community. Here's this woman who, with her husband, fought to eliminate this barrier to interracial marriage, making it possible for me to get married in Virginia, because I married a white woman in Virginia, and making it possible for others around the country who previously couldn't get married to get married now. She's an icon of the marriage movement. And now she can become an icon of the marriage equality movement. So again, like Mrs. King, I don't think as many people know as should know about Mrs. King's attitudes. And I don't think as many people know as should know about Mildred Loving's attitudes. And I'd hope she'd be raised up and used as an example. Here's this woman who fought for her own rights and now feels that she must also fight for others' rights.
Here's the closing cosmic question. I am a 17, 18-year-old black kid anywhere in the United States, urban America, rural America, suburban America, exurban America, and I just don't get the connection, that there is even a connection between the civil rights movement that you helped lead and the gay rights movement that I see all sorts of people pushing and leading, from people on television to people in politics, people in business. One, why should I care? And two, what is the connection? Convince me.
The connection is rights. Rights, that's the key word. These are movements for rights. And these are movements to ensure that everyone has these rights. And this 17-year-old kid may not think he's ever going to get married, or if he's straight, is going to marry a woman. But this guarantees his rights. And if he's not interested in his rights, then I wouldn't spend much time talking with him.
Thanks, Mr. Bond.
Thank you.